Maya Chen stood in the front office of Riverside Performing Arts Academy, clutching a worn folder against her chest. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she waited for someone to acknowledge her presence. Through the glass windows, she could see students her age walking past in expensive designer clothes, carrying instrument cases that probably cost more than her family's monthly rent. It was January, which meant she was starting school halfway through the year. Not ideal, but her father's job transfer hadn't given them much choice. They'd moved from a tiny town in the middle of nowhere to this bustling city, and Maya was still getting used to the noise, the crowds, and the fact that everything here seemed to cost 3 times what it did back home. "You must be our new transfer student," said a woman behind the desk, finally looking up from her computer. She had reading glasses perched on her nose and a smile that seemed friendly enough. "I'm Mrs. Patterson, the registrar. Welcome to Riverside." Maya nodded politely. "Thank you. Let me get your schedule sorted out," Mrs. Patterson said, typing away at her keyboard. "I see here you're interested in our music program?" "Yes, ma'am." "Wonderful. Do you play an instrument?" Maya hesitated for just a moment. "I play piano. How lovely. Well, you'll fit right in here, though I should warn you. The students here are quite serious about their music. Many of them have been training since they were very young." Mrs. Patterson handed her a printed schedule. "You'll start with Mrs. Harrison's music theory class. She's excellent with new students." As Maya walked through the hallways, she became acutely aware of how different she looked from everyone else. Her jeans came from a thrift store 2 towns over. Her jacket had been her older sister's. The backpack on her shoulders had been patched twice. Meanwhile, the other students looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog, all matching their expensive shoes to their equally expensive bags. Nobody paid her much attention, which was fine by Maya. She'd never been one to seek the spotlight anyway. When she found Mrs. Harrison's classroom, she slipped into a seat near the back. The room smelled like old wood and sheet music. A beautiful grand piano sat in the corner, its black surface gleaming under the lights. Maya felt her fingers twitch involuntarily, the way they always did when she saw a piano. Mrs. Harrison turned out to be a kind woman in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a flowing scarf and spoke with the passionate energy of someone who truly loved music. "Class, we have a new student joining us today," Mrs. Harrison announced. "This is Maya Chen. Maya, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?" Maya stood up awkwardly, feeling everyone's eyes on her. "Hi, I just moved here from Millbrook. It's a small town about 3 hours away. I'm looking forward to being here." "And do you have any musical background?" Mrs. Harrison asked encouragingly. "I've played piano a bit," Maya said quietly, then sat back down. She could feel the other students losing interest immediately. A bit of piano? That probably meant she knew how to plunk out "Mary Had a Little Lamb," or maybe a simplified version of "Für Elise." Nothing impressive. Over the next few days, Maya kept to herself. She attended her classes, ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria, and tried not to think too much about how much she missed her old home. The town where she'd grown up hadn't had much, but everyone knew everyone, and there was a comfortable familiarity to it all. During her first piano assessment with Mrs. Harrison, Maya played a simple piece she'd memorized years ago. She deliberately kept her performance basic, not adding any of the complicated runs or emotional depth she normally would have. When she finished, Mrs. Harrison smiled and made some notes on her clipboard. "That was nice, dear. I think we'll start you in the beginner's track. You have potential, but you'll need to build up your skills before joining the more advanced students." Maya simply nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrison." She didn't mention that she'd been playing piano since she was 3 years old. She didn't mention the countless hours spent in Professor Whitmore's dusty studio back in Millbrook, her fingers flying over the keys while he barked corrections from his armchair. She didn't mention the competitions she'd traveled to, or the trophies collecting dust in boxes somewhere in their new apartment. It wasn't that she wanted to hide her abilities. Maya just didn't see the point in making a big deal about it. She'd learned early on that talking about accomplishments often came across as bragging, and the last thing she wanted was to make people uncomfortable or jealous. The weeks passed slowly. In her beginner's track classes, Maya played simple scales and basic chord progressions alongside students who were genuinely just starting out. She offered helpful tips when asked, but never in a way that made others feel inferior. Meanwhile, she observed the advanced students from a distance. There was Claire Devereaux, the Academy's star pianist. She was a senior like Maya, with perfect posture and fingers that danced across the keys with mechanical precision. Claire came from money. That much was obvious from her designer clothes and the way she carried herself. She wasn't mean exactly, but she had a way of looking at people like Maya as if they were invisible. The head of the piano department was Mr. Castellano, a severe-looking man in his 60s who always wore dark suits and rarely smiled. Students whispered that he'd once been a concert pianist himself before an injury ended his performing career. Now he poured all his energy into training the next generation, and he had a reputation for being brutally honest about people's limitations. One morning in late February, an announcement echoed through the school's PA system during homeroom. Attention students, registration is now open for the annual spring showcase. This is your opportunity to perform before talent scouts and university representatives. If you wish to participate, please submit your name and proposed piece to the music department office by Friday. Remember, this showcase represents the Academy, so choose your repertoire wisely. Maya felt a flutter in her chest. A real performance. A real audience. She hadn't played for anyone except Mrs. Harrison since arriving at Riverside. During lunch, she stopped by the music department office and picked up a registration form. The secretary barely glanced at her as she handed it over. That evening, sitting at the small desk in her bedroom, Maya filled out the form carefully. Name, grade, instrument, and then the line for proposed piece. She left it blank and wrote, "To be determined." The next day, she dropped the completed form in the submission box outside Mr. Castellano's office. She didn't notice Mr. Castellano himself watching from his doorway, his eyebrows raised in surprise. He pulled out her form after she left, reading it with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Maya Chen, senior transfer, beginner's track, proposed piece to be determined. He made a note to discuss this at the next faculty meeting. Something about this quiet girl intrigued him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. As Maya walked home that afternoon, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Whatever happened next, at least she'd have the chance to really play again. That was all that mattered. The faculty meeting took place on a Thursday afternoon in the music department's conference room. Mr. Castellano sat at the head of the table, sorting through the showcase registration forms while the other music teachers settled into their chairs with coffee and tired expressions. "We have 23 students registered for the spring showcase," Mr. Castellano announced, his voice carrying its usual authority. "Most of the selections are appropriate. Claire Devereaux will be performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1, which should be excellent as always." Mrs. Harrison nodded approvingly. Claire had been working on that piece for nearly 2 years. "However," Mr. Castellano continued, his tone shifting, "we have a problem. One of the students registered without listing a piece, a transfer student named Maya Chen." Mrs. Harrison's expression changed to one of concern. "Oh, Maya, yes, she's in my beginner's track. She's a sweet girl, very quiet. To be honest, I'm surprised she signed up at all." "Beginner's track?" Mr. Castellano set down the form, his jaw tightening. "A beginner wants to perform at our most prestigious event of the year, in front of Juilliard scouts and symphony representatives. Perhaps she doesn't understand what the showcase is," offered Mr. Roberts, the violin instructor. "Maybe someone should explain that it's not exactly a recital for students still learning scales." "I'll handle this," Mr. Castellano said firmly. "Have her come to my office tomorrow during lunch period." The next day, Maya received a note during her morning class instructing her to report to Mr. Castellano's office. Her stomach knotted slightly as she made her way through the hallways. She'd never actually spoken to the head of the piano department before. His office was exactly what she expected. Walls lined with photographs of former students at prestigious venues, shelves filled with music theory books, and a large desk that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. Mr. Castellano looked up when she entered, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Miss Chen, please sit down." Maya settled into the chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I see you've registered for the spring showcase," he began, his fingers steepled in front of him. "But you didn't list a piece. That's required information." "I know, sir. I wasn't sure what to choose yet." "Mrs. Harrison tells me you're in the beginner's track. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Castellano leaned back in his chair, studying her. There was something about this girl that puzzled him. She didn't seem nervous exactly, just calm and quiet, almost too calm. Miss Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. The spring showcase is not a casual performance opportunity. We have talent scouts coming from the best music schools in the country. Students who perform at this event have typically been training at an advanced level for years. Most of them have been preparing their showcase pieces for months, even years. I understand, sir. Do you? His tone wasn't cruel, but it was firm. Because I need to know that whoever represents this academy on that stage is ready. Tell me honestly, what level would you say your piano skills are at? Maya thought carefully before answering. I can play most classical pieces, sir. I just need some time to practice whatever piece I choose. Mr. Castellano felt a flash of irritation. Most classical pieces? This girl had no idea what she was talking about. He'd seen this before. Students who overestimated their abilities, who didn't understand the difference between plunking through a simplified version of a song and actually performing it. An idea formed in his mind. Perhaps she needed a reality check, a dose of humility that would teach her about the real standards of classical music performance. All right, Miss Chen. Since you're confident you can play most classical pieces, I'm going to assign you one. Consider it my way of ensuring you're properly prepared. He pulled a catalog from his shelf and flipped through it deliberately. Let's see. Here we are. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. Are you familiar with it? Maya's eyes widened slightly. Yes, sir. I know it. Excellent. Then you understand it's one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. Professional pianists spend months, sometimes years, preparing it. But since you feel ready to perform at our showcase, this should be appropriate for someone of your abilities. His tone made it clear he expected her to back down. Of course, if you feel this is beyond your current level, you're welcome to withdraw from the showcase. No one would think less of you. Maya sat very still. She could feel the trap he'd set. He was testing her, expecting her to admit defeat and quietly disappear from the showcase roster. Part of her wanted to tell him the truth right then and there, that she'd performed Rach 3 before, that she'd won an international youth competition with it when she was 15. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was the condescending tone in his voice, or maybe it was just that she was tired of being underestimated. I'll do it, she said quietly. Rachmaninoff's third. Mr. Castellano blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Miss Chen, I don't think you understand. You asked me to choose a piece and you suggested this one. I'll perform it at the showcase. Her voice was still soft, but there was steel underneath it. For a moment, Mr. Castellano was speechless. Then he recovered, his expression hardening. Very well. You have 6 weeks until the showcase. The full concerto is typically performed with an orchestra, but you'll be playing the solo piano arrangement. I expect you to practice in the Academy studio so that I can monitor your progress. If at any point I feel you're not ready, I will pull you from the program. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. As Maya left his office, Mr. Castellano sat back in his chair, shaking his head. The girl had no idea what she'd just agreed to. He'd seen professional pianists stumble over Rach 3. The piece was nicknamed Rach 3 by musicians who feared it, a monster of technical difficulty requiring enormous handspans, lightning-fast precision, and deep emotional maturity. He'd given her an impossible task, fully expecting her to realize her mistake within a week and withdraw quietly. By the end of the day, word had spread through the music department like wildfire. The new girl, the transfer student from the beginner's track, was going to attempt Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto for the showcase. In the advanced practice rooms, Claire Devereaux heard the news from one of her friends and actually laughed out loud. You're kidding. The girl who can barely play scales is going to perform Rach 3? That's insane. Mr. Castellano must have assigned it to her as a joke, another student chimed in, to teach her a lesson about being realistic. Well, it's going to be embarrassing when she crashes and burns, Claire said, flipping her hair. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. The whispers followed Maya through the hallways. She could hear the snickers, see the smirks. Everyone seemed to think she'd made a fool of herself, that she'd bitten off far more than she could chew. Maya didn't respond to any of it. She simply went to the library after school, checked out the sheet music for Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, and tucked it carefully into her backpack. That evening, she sat at the small keyboard in her bedroom, Nothing like the grand pianos at the academy, but good enough for memory practice. She placed the sheet music on the stand, even though she didn't really need it. Her fingers knew this piece like an old friend. 6 weeks, Mr. Castellano had said. Maya smiled to herself. She'd need maybe 1 week to shake off the rust, just to make sure her muscle memory was sharp. The rest of the time would be about perfecting the emotional interpretation, finding the soul of the piece again. But she wouldn't practice at the academy studios. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her prepare, of seeing her work. Let them think what they wanted to think. When she performed on that stage, the music would speak for itself, and that would be enough. The first week after accepting the challenge, Maya didn't touch a single piano at Riverside Academy. Not during lunch, not after school, not even during her beginner's track classes when Mrs. Harrison offered her practice time. She simply went through her regular schedule like nothing had changed. This absence didn't go unnoticed. She hasn't practiced once, Mrs. Harrison mentioned to Mr. Castellano in the teacher's lounge one afternoon. I've checked the sign-up sheets for all the practice rooms. Her name isn't on any of them. Mr. Castellano sipped his coffee, unmoved. She's probably realized she's in over her head and doesn't want to embarrass herself by trying. Should we reach out to her? Maybe offer her a chance to switch to something more manageable? I gave her that option already. She made her choice. He set down his cup with a firm clink. If she wants to withdraw, she knows where my office is. But Maya didn't withdraw. Every day she showed up to school, attended her classes, and left without fanfare. She became even quieter than before, if that was possible. The other students mostly forgot about her upcoming performance, too focused on their own preparations. The academy's practice rooms were busy places during these weeks leading up to the showcase. Students booked time slots weeks in advance, competing for the rooms with the best acoustics and the finest pianos. Claire Devereaux practically lived in Practice Room A, the largest one with the concert-grade Steinway. Her Chopin piece echoed through the hallways during every lunch period and after school. It's going to be perfect, Claire told her friends one day as they gathered around her in the cafeteria. I've been working on this piece since sophomore year. Mrs. Harrison says it's the best she's ever heard from a student. You're definitely getting into Curtis Institute, one of her friends said admiringly. Or Juilliard. Honestly, I'd be happy with either. Claire took a delicate bite of her salad. I just hope they don't have to sit through too many mediocre performances before mine. Remember that girl who signed up for H3? What was her name again? Maya something. I haven't seen her practice at all. She probably gave up. Smart move if she did. What none of them knew was that Maya had found her own place to practice, and she'd found it by accident. During her second week at Riverside, Maya had gotten lost trying to find the art supply room. She'd wandered into a section of the building that seemed forgotten, a hallway with dim lighting and doors that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. One door at the very end was slightly ajar, and curiosity got the better of her. Inside was what appeared to be an old storage room. Dusty boxes lined the walls filled with outdated textbooks and broken music stands. But in the corner, covered with a faded sheet, was an upright piano. Maya had lifted the sheet carefully, revealing an old Yamaha that had definitely seen better days. The wood was scratched and a few of the keys stuck slightly. But when she pressed middle C, the sound that emerged was surprisingly pure. She'd asked Mrs. Harrison about it later, casually, trying not to seem too interested. Oh, that old thing, Mrs. Harrison had said with a dismissive wave. It used to be in one of the practice rooms years ago, but we upgraded all the instruments. I think they moved it to storage and just forgot about it. Why do you ask? Just curious. I saw it when I got lost the other day. Well, it's probably still playable if you're ever desperate for practice time and all the good rooms are booked. Maya had smiled and thanked her, knowing she'd found exactly what she needed. That night, she stayed late after school on the pretense of working on homework in the library. She waited until most of the building had emptied out, then made her way to the storage room. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and she half expected someone to come investigate the noise. But the hallway remained silent. She sat at the bench, adjusted her position, and placed her fingers on the keys. Then she began to play. The first run-through was rusty, she had to admit. It had been months since she'd played anything substantial, and her fingers needed to remember the pathways through Rachmaninoff's demanding composition. Some of the passages felt awkward, and she stumbled twice on sections that used to flow effortlessly. But by the second time through, muscle memory started kicking in. Her hands began to move with more confidence, finding the familiar patterns and rhythms. The emotional core of the piece started to emerge, the longing in the second movement, the triumph in the third. She played for 2 hours that first night, stopping only when her shoulders started to ache. When she finally stood up, her fingers were tingling with the good kind of soreness that came from real practice. This became her routine. Every evening, after the building had mostly emptied, Maya would slip into the storage room and practice. She usually arrived around 7:30 and played until 10, sometimes later if she was working through a particularly difficult passage. The academy had a security guard who made rounds, but he was an elderly man named Mr. Wu who'd worked at Riverside for over 30 years. He was generally more concerned with locking doors and checking windows than investigating every small sound in a building full of music rooms. But Mr. Wu did notice something unusual after the first week. During his nightly rounds, he kept hearing piano music coming from somewhere he couldn't quite place. It wasn't coming from any of the official practice rooms. Those were all locked by 7 p.m. The sound was fainter, more distant, but hauntingly beautiful. One night, his curiosity got the better of him. He followed the sound through the dim hallways until he reached the old storage area. The door to the storage room was closed but not locked, and light seeped through the crack at the bottom. Mr. Wu opened the door slowly, careful not to make noise. Inside, that quiet transfer student, the one people whispered about, the one attempting the impossible piece, sat at the old Yamaha with complete focus. Her eyes were closed and her whole body moved with the music. The piano might have been old and imperfect, but in her hands it sang like it had never sung before. Mr. Wu had heard countless students practice over his decades at the academy. He'd heard prodigies and mediocrities, passionate performers and mechanical players. But what he heard from Maya that night was something different. It wasn't just technical skill, though that was clearly there in abundance. It was the way she played with her entire soul, like the music was part of her breathing. He stood in the doorway for nearly 20 minutes, completely transfixed. When Maya finally paused to rest her hands, Mr. Wu quietly pulled the door closed and walked away, a small smile on his weathered face. He didn't report her presence to anyone. Instead, he made sure that doors stayed unlocked every evening. Sometimes he'd even leave a bottle of water on the shelf near the piano, though he never mentioned it and Maya never acknowledged it. It was their unspoken agreement. He'd give her this secret place to practice, and she'd fill the empty building with music that reminded him why he'd taken this job in the first place. Meanwhile, during the daytime at Riverside Academy, the assumption solidified into fact in everyone's minds. Maya had given up. She must have realized the piece was impossible and decided to fail quietly rather than withdraw. Officially, Mr. Castellano stopped checking. For her name on the practice room logs, Mrs. Harrison stopped asking if she needed help. The other students stopped gossiping about her entirely. She'd become just another face in the hallway, unremarkable and easy to forget. Claire Devereaux booked extra time in the best practice room, confident that her performance would be the undisputed highlight of the showcase. Only Mr. Wu knew the truth. And every night as he made his rounds through the quiet building, he'd pause near that storage room hallway and listen to the sound of a young woman pouring her heart into one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. It was, he thought, the most beautiful secret he'd ever kept. The night before the spring showcase, Maya stayed in the storage room later than usual. It was past midnight when she finally played through Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto one last time, her fingers moving across the keys with a confidence that had grown stronger with each passing week. She held the final chord, letting it fade into silence, then sat back and took a deep breath. She was ready. More than ready, actually. The piece felt like an extension of herself now. Every note precisely where it needed to be. Every emotion perfectly channeled. Beautiful, came a voice from the doorway. Maya jumped, spinning around to see Mr. Wu standing there with his usual gentle smile. Her heart was racing. She'd thought she was alone. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know I'm not supposed to be here this late. I just needed to—" Mr. Wu held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't apologize. I've been listening to you practice for weeks now. You've made this old man very happy with your music." He stepped into the room, his keys jingling at his belt. Tomorrow is the big day, yes? Maya nodded, relief washing over her. He wasn't angry. You're going to do wonderfully, Mr. Wu said with certainty. I've worked here for 30 years and I've never heard anyone play like you do. Not even close, thank you, Maya said softly. And thank you for, not saying anything. For leaving the door unlocked. Some things are worth keeping quiet about. Mr. Wu's eyes twinkled. Now go home and get some rest. You have a lot of people to surprise tomorrow. The day of the showcase arrived with perfect spring weather. The auditorium at Riverside Academy was a beautiful space with excellent acoustics, red velvet seats, and a stage that had hosted countless performances over the decades. By 6 p.m. every seat was filled. Parents sat proudly in their best clothes. Talent scouts from prestigious music schools like Juilliard and Curtis Institute occupied the front rows, their expressions professional and evaluating. Representatives from various symphony orchestras were scattered throughout the audience, always on the lookout for emerging talent. Backstage, the energy was electric with nervous excitement. Students in formal concert attire paced back and forth, some practicing finger exercises in the air, others breathing deeply to calm their nerves. Claire Devereaux looked flawless in a designer gown that probably cost more than Maya's family car. She was scheduled to perform in the second half of the program, a prime slot that Mr. Castellano had personally selected for his star student. Maya sat quietly in a corner, wearing a simple black dress she'd found at a consignment shop. It was plain but elegant, and most importantly, it allowed her arms to move freely. She wasn't nervous exactly, just focused. In her mind, she was already playing, already lost in the music. Mrs. Harrison found her there and crouched down beside her chair. Maya, honey, are you sure you want to go through with this? There's no shame in withdrawing even now. We could say you weren't feeling well. Maya looked at her teacher's concerned face and smiled. I'm okay, Mrs. Harrison, really. It's just, Rachmaninoff's third is so difficult, and I haven't heard you practice at all. I'm worried you might not be prepared, and I'd hate for you to be embarrassed up there. I appreciate your concern, Maya said gently. But I promise I've been practicing. Just not in the usual places. Mrs. Harrison wanted to say more, but the stage manager was calling for places. She squeezed Maya's shoulder and hurried off to take her seat in the audience. The showcase began with a violin solo, followed by a cello performance. Each student performed well, displaying the technical skills and musicality that Riverside Academy was known for. The audience applauded politely after each piece, and the scouts made notes on their clipboards. Maya was scheduled to perform fifth, right before the intermission. As the fourth performer took their bow and exited the stage, Maya stood and smoothed her dress. Her hands were steady. The stage manager gave her a sympathetic look. You're up next. Good luck out there. Maya walked to the wings and waited for her introduction. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the audience, the scouts, the expectant faces. She could also see Mr. Castellano sitting in the third row, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Harrison was beside him, looking genuinely worried. Our next performer is Maya Chen, a senior transfer student, announced the master of ceremonies. She'll be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. There was a ripple of surprise through the audience. Several of the scouts actually looked up from their notes, interest peaked. Rachmaninoff's third at a high school showcase? That was unusual to say the least. In the audience, Mr. Castellano's jaw tightened. This was it, the moment when his lesson would be complete. The girl would struggle through the opening, realize she was in over her head, and learn something about hubris. It would be painful to watch, but necessary. Maya walked onto the stage and the bright lights washed over her. For a moment, she stood there taking in the sea of faces. Then she walked to the grand piano, a beautiful Steinway that gleamed under the stage lights, and sat down on the bench. She adjusted her position slightly, testing the pedals. The piano was magnificent, so different from the old Yamaha in the storage room. This instrument would sing. Maya placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes for just a moment, and began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto filled the auditorium like a wave. Strong, confident, perfectly executed. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with breathtaking speed and precision, navigating the complex runs and chord progressions that made this piece so feared among pianists. In the audience, Mr. Castellano's eyes went wide. Mrs. Harrison's hand flew to her mouth. The scouts leaned forward in their seats, pens frozen above their clipboards. This wasn't just competent playing. This was extraordinary. Maya's whole body moved with the music, swaying with the emotional peaks and valleys of the composition. Her hands stretched across impossible intervals, her fingers striking each note with perfect clarity even at lightning speed. The technically demanding passages that usually tripped up even professionals flowed from her like water, effortless and natural. But it wasn't just the technical mastery that held everyone spellbound. It was the emotion. Maya played like she was telling a story, like every note meant something personal and profound. The second movement brought tears to several audience members' eyes with its haunting beauty. The third movement built to a triumphant crescendo that had people literally sitting on the edge of their seats. Backstage, Claire Devereaux stood frozen in the wings, listening in disbelief. This was impossible. That quiet girl from the beginner's track, the one everyone had dismissed, the one who wore thrift store clothes and never said much. She was playing like a world-class concert pianist. In the front row, a scout from Juilliard was writing furiously on her notepad. Next to her, a representative from Curtis Institute had abandoned all pretense of professional detachment and was simply watching with his mouth slightly open. The final movement of the concerto built to its powerful conclusion. Maya's hands flew across the keys in the last cascade of notes, each one crystal clear despite the incredible speed. Then came the final chord, strong, definitive, perfect. She held it, letting it ring through the auditorium, filling every corner of the space with sound. Then silence. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The audience sat in stunned disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. Then someone in the back row started clapping. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. People jumped to their feet, the standing ovation spreading like wildfire through the crowd. The applause wasn't polite or appreciative, it was overwhelming, the kind of response usually reserved for professional concerts at Carnegie Hall. Maya stood and took a small bow, her face calm, but her eyes shining. As she looked out at the standing crowd, she caught Mr. Wu's eye near the back exit. He was clapping harder than anyone, tears streaming down his weathered face, a huge smile breaking across his features. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Maya bowed again, then began to walk off stage, but the audience wouldn't let her go. They kept clapping, some people shouting, "Bravo!" until she returned for a second bow. Backstage, Maya finally allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. She'd done it. She'd let the music speak for itself, and it had said everything that needed to be said. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. Maya had barely made it backstage when the scouts started rushing toward the stage entrance, business cards in hand, all of them trying to be the first to speak with her. The stage manager had to politely but firmly ask them to return to their seats so the showcase could continue. They went reluctantly, casting glances back at the stage exit where Maya had disappeared. Backstage, the other student performers stared at Maya like she'd just appeared out of thin air. The girl they'd barely noticed for months, the one they'd dismissed and laughed about, had just delivered what was arguably the most stunning performance in Riverside Academy history. Claire Devereaux stood near the curtain, her face pale. She was supposed to go on in 20 minutes to perform her Chopin piece, the one she'd been perfecting for 2 years, the one that was supposed to be the highlight of the evening. Now it felt like anything she did would be anticlimactic. Maya found a quiet corner and sat down, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of performing. She'd done what she came to do. Now she just wanted to catch her breath and let the moment settle. "Maya?" She looked up to see Mrs. Harrison standing there, her eyes red and wet with tears. "Mrs. Harrison, The older woman pulled her into a tight hug. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." "I had no idea. No idea at all." She pulled back, holding Maya at arm's length. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell any of us?" Maya shrugged slightly. "I don't know. I guess I just didn't think it mattered." "I didn't want to make a big deal about it. Didn't matter?" "Maya, you just played like a professional concert pianist. This matters very much." Mrs. Harrison shook her head in amazement. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "Back in Millbrook. There was a retired pianist there, Professor Whitmore. He used to perform all over the world before he got sick and had to stop. He took me on as a student when I was 3. And the competitions? The training? We traveled a lot when I was younger. Europe, Asia, some places in the States. I won a few competitions, but my family couldn't really afford to keep doing it. When we had to move here, we were just focused on making ends meet. The music was just something I did for me, you know? Mrs. Harrison looked at her with a mixture of awe and regret. I put you in the beginner's track. I assumed you were just starting out. You were being kind and making sure I had a place to learn. I appreciated that. Before Mrs. Harrison could respond, Mr. Castellano appeared. His face was hard to read, somewhere between shock, shame, and something that might have been respect. Miss Chen, he said formally, may I speak with you privately? Mrs. Harrison squeezed Maya's hand once, then slipped away to give them space. For a long moment, Mr. Castellano just looked at Maya. Then he did something she never expected. He sat down beside her, suddenly looking much older and more tired. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I assigned you that piece to teach you a lesson. To humble you. I thought you were an overconfident transfer student who needed to learn her place. He paused, his jaw working. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. You gave me the chance to play the piece I love most, Maya said simply. I'm grateful for that. You don't have to be gracious about this. I was condescending and dismissive. I made assumptions based on nothing but my own prejudices. He looked at his hands. In my defense, though it's not much of a defense, I've seen many students overestimate their abilities over the years. But that's no excuse. I should have actually listened to you play before making any judgments. It's okay, Mr. Castellano. Really, it's not okay, but I appreciate your kindness. He looked at her seriously. Where did you train? Who taught you? Maya told him about Professor Whitmore, about the years of rigorous training, about the competition she'd won but never talked about. James Whitmore. Mr. Castellano's eyes widened. James Whitmore was your teacher? The James Whitmore who performed at Carnegie Hall and the Royal Albert Hall? Yes, sir. He retired to Millbrook for health reasons. He said the quiet helped him think. Mr. Castellano let out a long breath. He was one of the greatest pianists of his generation. If he trained you, he shook his head. Maya, do you realize what this means? The scouts out there are going to offer you full scholarships. Multiple schools will want you. I just wanted to play, Maya said honestly. That's all I ever wanted. The showcase continued, though it was clear that everyone's mind was still on Maya's performance. Claire did perform her Chopin piece, and she performed it well, technically perfect, emotionally appropriate. The audience applauded warmly, but there was no standing ovation, no scouts rushing the stage. After what they'd heard from Maya, even excellence seemed ordinary. When the showcase ended and the house lights came up, Maya was immediately surrounded. The scout from Juilliard got to her first, pressing a business card into her hand. I'd like to talk to you about our program, she said eagerly. Full scholarship, of course, plus stipend for living expenses. We have faculty who would be honored to work with someone of your caliber. The Curtis Institute representative was right behind her. We can offer you private instruction with some of the best pianists in the world. Our acceptance rate is lower than any other music school. We only take the absolute best. There were others too. Conservatories, universities, symphony representatives asking if she'd consider guest performances. Maya listened politely to all of them, accepting business cards with a slightly overwhelmed smile. Her parents had been in the audience, and they made their way through the crowd to her. Her mother's face was glowing with pride, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her father kept shaking his head in amazement, unable to find words. We'll need time to consider all the options, Maya's father said diplomatically to the scouts, putting a protective arm around his daughter. This is a lot to process. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Maya found herself standing alone on the stage for a moment. The auditorium was nearly empty now, chairs pushed slightly askew, programs scattered on the floor. The big Steinway still sat in its spotlight waiting for the next performance. She heard footsteps and turned to see Mr. Wu approaching, his cleaning cart beside him. He was officially back on duty, but his eyes were still bright with emotion. You did it, young lady, he said warmly. You showed them all. I couldn't have done it without you, Maya said sincerely. Thank you for giving me that space to practice. For keeping my secret. It was my privilege, Mr. Wu said. You know what the best part was? Every night listening to you play, I remembered why I fell in love with music in the first place. You reminded this old man that sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones hidden away, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Maya hugged him, this kind man who'd protected her secret and made her journey possible. Later that night, back in her small bedroom, Maya sat at her modest keyboard and played quietly. The showcase was over. The applause had faded. The scouts had gone home with their business cards and promises. But the music remained, and that was what mattered most. She thought about Mr. Castellano's assumption that she was just another overconfident student. She thought about how quickly people had dismissed her because of how she looked, where she came from, how quietly she moved through the world. But she also thought about Mrs. Harrison's tears of joy, about Mr. Wu's proud smile, about the audience members who'd been moved by her performance. She thought about how music had the power to change minds, to bridge gaps, to show people that their assumptions weren't always right. In the end, Maya had learned something too. She'd learned that sometimes staying quiet and letting your actions speak was the most powerful statement you could make. She'd learned that you didn't need to announce your abilities to validate them, and she'd learned that the right moment to shine would always come, as long as you were patient and prepared. The scholarship offers would need to be reviewed. Decisions would need to be made about her future. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of her room, Maya just played. She played for herself, for the pure joy of it, the way she always had. And somewhere in the now empty Riverside Academy, if you listened carefully, you could almost still hear the echo of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, a reminder that extraordinary things often come from the most unexpected places. All you have to do is give them a chance to be heard.